Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining the AAWC, the Afghan-American Women's Collective. We're back again with another live panel. This time we're changing it up. We're doing a panel with some of your board members. The topic tonight is feeling like a fraud, imposter syndrome. I think everyone can relate to this topic, so we're really excited to have a discussion around it. We're going to go ahead and go around and introduce ourselves, and then we'll jump right in. My name is Samaya Kazimi. I am the Programming and Logistics Chair for AAWC. Whoever wants to jump in.
My name is Omaira Sherzai, and I am the Networking Chair for AAWC.
Hi everyone, my name is Nina. I am the Marketing Co-Chair for AAWC.
Hi everyone, my name is Yasmin Bond, and I'm the Executive Director of AAWC.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and jump in. So, I hear, well, a few years ago, I didn't even know that there was something or a term or words to even describe what I was feeling, but imposter syndrome, I hear it a lot these days. But essentially it's, and I'm just going to read this verbatim, it's thoughts of self-doubt in relation to accomplishments with the fear of being exposed as a fraud. People attribute their success to luck, even though there is evidence of their competence. And although it's labeled as a syndrome, it's not an official disorder. So the history behind imposter syndrome, or the point of that term, imposter syndrome, is a couple of psychologists back in the 70s, women. They did some research among high achieving women, and that's how they kind of came up with the whole idea of imposter syndrome. And initially they thought that it was unique to women, but with further research, it's shown that both men and women deal with imposter syndrome pretty equally, so at the same rate. Also, imposter syndrome, there's a lot of information out there on the web. If you Google it, so much information comes up. But one of the things that's really interesting about imposter syndrome is that it can be broken up into 5 categories. And I'm going to briefly touch on the categories, and we'll go through and talk about kind of what category we identify with. So there's the perfectionist. The perfectionist sets excessively high goals for themselves, and if they fail to reach a goal, they experience major self-doubt. Then you have the superwoman or superman that kind of can take everything on, or wants to take everything on, and they let their hobbies kind of and their passions go, and they sacrifice to work. Sometimes they're called workaholics. Then you have the natural genius, where they feel like they just need to know. They excel without much effort, and if they don't get something right away, then they have feelings of shame. Then you have the soloist. So the soloist is someone that is will take on things by themselves just to prove their worth. So they have a sense of that they can accomplish anything on their own. Then you have the expert, and they measure their competence based on the what and the how much they know or can do. And so if they can't meet a certain certain goal, then again they have this feelings of feeling like a fraud, or even feeling shame. So those are the 5, and for myself personally, I would definitely fall in the category of the superwoman and superman. I was going to say super mom, and that might be related to the fact that I am a mom, and I feel like I'm always juggling different hats. But I definitely am at work quick to volunteer, and even though sometimes I get things done, but I definitely sometimes tend to take on more than I really should comfortably. But no, just kind of ingrained in me is to be helpful, get in there and do what you need to do to help your teammates. So anybody else wants to go ahead and jump in and kind of tell us what you guys feel, or what you feel like you fall into, what category?
I can go next. school, I remember people saying that, why do you always have to be perfect? And it just never resonated to me that, you know, that I was like that. I would think that I'm not like that. But when reading some of the different characteristics of a perfectionist, I always like to be in control, and I delegate, but if I could do it on my own, I'd rather do it on my own because I feel like I want to make sure that it's perfect. I, like Samaya, am a mom, and I have been called helicopter mom because I'm controlling is what he says in everything he does to make sure that it's perfect and right. So it gets stressful, obviously, because everything has to be right the first time, and I feel like I need to work on that, but definitely my perfectionism is my category.
I definitely think I fall into somewhere between the perfectionist and the expert. The expert because I don't have a traditional, I guess, career journey that most people do in terms of like studying something that you actually go into the field and working in that field. I initially started off with pre-nursing major, graduated with a sociology degree, and I work in a pharmaceutical company now. So I feel like I definitely feel like an imposter when I'm at work because people ask about my degree. Although many of us know in the millennial generation that you don't necessarily have to study a field and work and get a job in that field after you graduate. These are a lot of like very learned skills that you do once you are in the workforce. So I feel like I always have to justify myself and my knowledge, and I'm constantly looking for ways that I can improve myself because I know on paper people may think less of my qualifications because I didn't necessarily have a biology or a chemistry degree, which is what most people in this industry have, but it doesn't make me less qualified. But I definitely have that apprehension myself, and sometimes I do doubt myself when it comes to some of the work that I do because although I've taken some of the prereqs for nursing and I definitely have a bit of science degree in my background, I don't have that degree on paper, and so even when I'm applying for jobs, that comes into question, and they're just like, oh, so you're in a sociology degree, you have like, you know, now almost 10 plus years of industry experience, but that is something that they end up on sometimes. And so I feel like an imposter working in the field that I've been in for almost 10 years now.
Yeah, I think I would categorize myself as the soloist. And I think it probably comes from the fact that growing up, I always did everything by myself. I never asked for help with homework. I never asked for help putting something together. It was like I was always an independent kid, which I actually think is probably a common feature with a lot of us, of having parents who were not raised here and who didn't go through the same school systems and whatnot, and because things were so foreign to them, there were a lot of things we just picked up ourselves and did it. And so I think that was a habit that I picked up when I was young, and I think where I really got pushback on it was when I started working in the professional space, when it kind of hits you in the face that you can't do everything yourself. And so trying to unlearn that habit and understanding that it's okay to ask questions, you shouldn't get nervous to ask questions, you can go to people and they can help you. Something that I think I've acknowledged it, and I am taking steps to address it and try to overcome it, which has been something I've been working on. But I think that puts me sometimes in situations and meetings where, because I might not know how to jump in and say something, or I feel unprepared, and instead of just asking someone, I'm like, well, I can figure out, I can do it myself. Let me just go and see how that's done. Let me go see what that means, because I don't want to look like the idiot in the room when everyone else knows what this word means, and I'm like, huh? Like, what are you guys talking about? So, but then I think what I also do is I try to look for examples of people doing that in meetings. So when I do catch that, let's say we're all in a meeting and someone says a word and I'm like, I don't get it. And Samaya goes, wait, pause, what does that word mean? I'm like, okay, I can ask that question next time. So I try to do stuff like that too, where I am fully aware of what situation I'm in and why I'm acting the way I'm acting. And I try to, in that moment, address it But like, what happens if no one in that room asks that question? And I think that I might dig myself deeper in that hole of like, oh, now you really don't know what they're talking about. So yeah, I would consider myself a soloist and very much acknowledge that that is what I would identify as, but I'm also trying to work on it, trying to figure out how to get past it. But I think so. So Maya is referencing an article that she shared with us earlier. That is awesome. She'll share it with you guys afterwards, so you guys can take a look at this too.
Yeah, we'll definitely post it. And so any resources that we reference, we'll go ahead and post it after the panel so that everyone has access to it. It's interesting, some of the things that you brought up, especially as far as growing up feeling like you did everything by yourself. And one of the things that contributes to imposter syndrome is the way you grew up, and the messages you received as a child, or the environment. Even if you're part of a marginalized group, when you enter the workplace, and if you don't see people that look like you or talk like you, or even in the same age group as you, that imposter syndrome can come from that as well. So it could be situational. For example, like not knowing a word, right, and not feeling confident enough to ask, what the meaning is, but also just not feeling like you're in the right place. So I do want to get into the first question. I know we kind of touched on it, our experiences, at a high level, but can you share a specific personal experience with imposter syndrome in a professional setting? And then has dealing with imposter syndrome limited you in any way from going after new opportunities? And if so, did you overcome it? Just if you guys can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I can go first. I feel like the examples that are popping up in my head were from probably like 2 to 3 years ago. And it was at the time, the team that I was on was shifting from like a community team where we were focused on community building on college campuses with students to more of a marketing team. And that transition was, I had never been on a marketing team before, and being in those meetings and hearing people have these conversations using these marketing terms and talking about the goals that we're going to set and what we're going to do next, it just felt like I was in the wrong room. And I just could not find a way to contribute to these conversations because I didn't know where to start. And all that I thought I could contribute were just a whole bunch of questions. Looking back, if I had those questions, most people in the room had those questions. So it probably would have benefited had I asked them, because most of the people in the room was also transitioning the same way I was. Well, hindsight, like 2020, but at the time, it felt very debilitating, and that I didn't quite understand how I was going to fit in this team moving forward. And so, granted, we had at the time hired people on the team that had years and years of marketing experience. And I think one thing I did was I let myself go talk to them and ask them questions and clarify with them. So maybe I wouldn't clarify in the room. I would think up with my manager afterwards and would be like, what did X, Y, and Z mean? What does this mean? Why was she saying this? Why was he saying that? And having those conversations outside of the meeting would help me understand what the situation was in that particular instance. And I think it took me, like, I would say a good 6 to 8 months to get past it. And I think because of the fact that I am such a soloist and that I like to do things myself, I was really thrown in a situation where it hit me hard that I really couldn't. I was like, nowhere in your brain do you have marketing experience. You can't pull this out of anywhere. You need to start asking questions and understand that it's okay. But I would get nervous asking questions. Like, I would go through the question over in my head over and over and over again to make sure it was like the perfect question to ask. But then at the end of the day, a question is still a question. As long as you get a response that's going to help you, even if you don't, like, you'll get something from it. But yeah, that was, I would say, a really tough time for me, feeling like I was such an outsider in that particular space.
Yeah, I mean, you're bringing up the point of asking questions, but by asking those questions, that helps build confidence. It'll lead to that confidence that that initially you were lacking. Mina or Humaira?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I wanted to add on to that because that was one of my personal experiences that I wanted to bring up is the questions, but I wanted to speak a little bit more to it in that it wasn't only the questions, but when I had to speak to a topic that I was, I knew a little bit about, where I was familiar about, but not an expert in, I was always hesitant to give my thoughts or to speak about it or talk about concerns I had because I didn't know 100%, which goes back to my being a perfectionist, 100% about the topic. And so I was afraid that I would look bad if I said something that wasn't right. And I also didn't want to ask, I didn't want people to know that I wasn't an expert at that because I didn't want myself to look bad and not to look like I didn't know what I was talking about. So it was always hard to go and ask questions or even to tell somebody that I didn't know something 100% because I didn't want them to think that I didn't know what I was talking about. And I'm going to go into, if it's okay, as far as overcoming it and how it may limited my opportunities. But as far as overcoming it, well, you know what, let me go with the limiting. It did limit, I feel, the opportunities because I felt that I was capable of a lot of things, but I wouldn't go for it because I felt like I didn't know what I was doing. And I didn't want to look bad. So I wouldn't ask those questions. I wouldn't talk about those subjects, or I wouldn't go for help because I just, like I said, I didn't want to look bad. And what I ended up doing is talking to a few people and getting a support group at work. And that really helped me overcome some of that self-doubt that I put on myself. Understand that by me asking those questions and giving insight gives that different perspective that people may not have thought about, and that kind of helped me speak up as well, because I never thought that me going outside of the box would really help someone else also. Additionally, just being able to tell myself that I'm good at what I do and where I am. I'm where I am for a reason, and that has helped me get that reassurance, and it has helped me to be able to speak up and talk about a certain subject that I may not be perfect at.
Yeah, that's one of the things that comes up as a common theme is how to get yourself to stop. Actually, the way to get over imposter syndrome is to stop thinking like an imposter. So just reiterate why you are where you're at, what your qualifications, or if you're in a position where you have to take specialized training or go to some sort of vocational school or anything like that. You're there for a reason. You were hired for a reason. And even though you were in the right place at the right time, there might be some luck involved. Well, what are you going to do with that luck? What are you going to do from here on out? You got the job. Now, how are you going to, make a difference in that job? Mina?
Yeah, I definitely can relate to someone's experience in terms of coming into a role that you feel like you're really underqualified for. Or I won't say that you felt like you're really underqualified. My own experience that I felt that I wanted. But the role that I was doing in previously to the one that I'm in right now, I basically had a very strong referral from 2 people to the hiring manager. It was an internal position that I'd applied for at the company I was at previously. And basically it was a quality oversight over manufacturing. And most people who take on a role like this come and they're promoted from a manufacturing level. So they basically are experts on the process. They already know from top to bottom how to the manufacturing process of everything, all the problems that go wrong with it, how to mitigate it, all of that jazz. I came in from a separate department, and I was hired on with 2 other people who had basically gotten promoted from manufacturing. So I felt like either my recommendation was really strong, which I knew my work quality and my work ethic from my previous role definitely stood for itself. But then I was constantly comparing myself to my 2 peers because they already knew everything. They came from manufacturing. Now they're in a quality position, whereas I was learning everything from scratch. And to top it off, I had to work with the leadership really closely. So not only did I have to ask questions to learn the process, but I was working with the supervisors, and so I felt even more hesitant to ask the questions that I had because I didn't want the supervisors to think that I was an idiot, that I didn't know what I was doing. And when they have to escalate issues, then they would veer away from asking and escalating them to me because they're like, oh, well, Mina doesn't know what she's talking about yet because I didn't come from a manufacturing role. So I felt like an imposter in myself, and I also felt like I didn't have the trust of the people that I was hired on to give oversight and guidance for. So it was like a double doozy for me, and it definitely took a long time for me to get comfortable asking the questions, not feeling like I was too shy to ask people in leadership questions, and knowing that they knew they had to train me. So they took that on. I definitely was qualified for the position, but it took me a long time to feel that confidence in myself. But knowing that the only way that I overcame it is I got sick and tired of being afraid of asking questions. I would ask my peers questions. I would ask the people in the manufacturing department questions. I would ask people in leadership questions. You know, and it just, once you get comfortable and you shed that like weariness of not knowing and looking like an idiot, I definitely think it helps open up the possibilities of what you actually are capable of. And that fear definitely is instilled in you, especially when you're new. And you're just like, I don't want to give them a bad impression. I want them to know that they hired me for a reason. I'm worth that risk that they took. But it definitely was a little, not traumatizing, but like paralyzing for me coming into a new role.
Yeah, no, I definitely can empathize with that, coming into a new role. So my experience was, when I became a first-time manager, I was promoted very quickly. I mean, there was a lot of people there that had been there for a lot longer than I had been. So I had to deal with that and a little bit of resentment, from those folks. And then also I was the youngest among the group at the time. So I didn't, even though I got promoted, and I think I got promoted because I was, a fast learner and I had the soft skills, and, these folks saw something in me and they thought that I could, take on the role of a manager. But I didn't have the respect of my peers. So it was really difficult. I would feel, sometimes I felt like, okay, I'm just going to get and I'm going to walk out. That's it. Like, I can't deal with this. Like, nobody would talk to me. And then I eventually just spoke up. I went and talked to one of the senior managers that I had a pretty good relationship with, and gave me some really good advice. He was like, you just have to start asking questions, set up, one-on-ones with these people, go into their offices, introduce yourself. They know you, but do they really know you? Just take that thing. And also for me, this is a little bit of that Afghan identity that came into it. I felt like I didn't want to be a brown noser either, right? Go in and, hey, be my friend. And so that was a little bit of a challenge. But as soon as I start talking, taking the initiative, it definitely, attitudes changed. And, I walked away with a lot more support than I, walked into the role with. Did anyone have anything else to add on that? If not, and we can go on to the next question.
Actually, I had a follow-up to what you mentioned, but you touched on being the youngest person in your role. I definitely, I don't know if Yasaman or Omaida, if you guys can relate, if you guys have ever been in positions where you feel like your age makes you feel like an imposter, because you're like, I'm the youngest person here, and I feel like the breadth of experience that I have may not be as comparable to someone else in the same position because they've just been in the industry longer. So age makes them more qualified than I am. I can speak for myself that I feel like I've most often been the youngest in my department by far, like a really big age gap, and I feel a little bit of an imposter syndrome for that as well, because I'm just like, well, usually people at my age aren't in a position or a role like this with this many responsibilities. So I feel like I've probably, I don't know, said something during my interview process to make them think that I'm more capable than I am, but just because of my age itself, not because I feel like I can't perform the job capabilities of what my accountabilities are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I work at a startup, so I would say here, when I started working here, I didn't feel like an imposter because of my age, because the people working at the company were so young. I think at the time, like, my manager was 27, 28, and I was 23, and I think the CEO was 27 as well. So overall, the age of the company was significantly young. But I think as we went from 33 people to now to almost 170, and as we're hiring more experienced people that are coming into the company, I think that is where that is shifting a little bit, and that not people are coming in that are older than us, but that equates to, as we're mentioning, more experience. And they come in and you can sense it and feel it right away. And I think there's also an element of us not being intimidated by it, but seeing it more as an opportunity of people now joining that I can learn from, and I can get to that place that they are right now. It's a mental thing, but I think that's like the current shift that's happening in the right now here.
That's a good point. A lot of it has to do with you just retraining yourself, retraining yourself on how to think and how to, be objective about a situation. So that's a really good point. So the next question I wanted to move on to was, what do you think is unique about how women experience feelings of self-doubt compared to how men experience it? And how do you think the gender bias contributes to imposter syndrome?
When I was reading this question earlier, I was like, I have no idea how to answer this because I don't know. I have never asked a man this question. So I don't know what the response is, but I was reading an article earlier today that was stating, and you talked about a little bit, Maya, about how in terms of imposter syndrome, men feel this as well. Mm-hmm. It's more about how they react to it that could be the difference. And in the article was saying that a lot of times when women face self-doubt, they tend to step back or to not move forward on things that they would like to, versus if men feel it, it doesn't necessarily have that same type of reaction. They might not feel like they're qualified for something, but they still might try to go do it. And they're saying how that is what the difference is, and that is what can cause the discrepancies of opportunities when moving forward. And that there's a chart that we'll share with you guys later, but it was showing the percentage of like men and women like feeling confident over like different age ranges, and that the women, the older they got, the more confident they became in themselves, versus for men it did increase a little bit, but for the most part it was pretty stable. Like they're pretty confident. By the time they get older, they're still pretty confident. It doesn't really change much. But the article was saying how imagine those first 10 years, like the impact it can make and the decisions that you are making then that can potentially prohibit you from other opportunities in the future because of the way you felt in your 20s and early 30s, which I thought was a very interesting point, because the graph was also saying at the end, when women get older, they tend to be more confident than men, which I think is not surprising to any of us. It was more about that beginning and how that can impact the future. So that to me was most interesting. But in terms of the direct connection or how exactly it impacts one versus another, like, I don't feel like I have the answer to that.
Fair enough.
Actually, I remember it was probably a couple years ago, we were talking about applying for jobs and how women, if they don't match like 10 out of 10 criteria for a job description, we tend not to apply because we feel like we're underqualified. Whereas guys, if they meet like half, 5 out of 10, they're just like, well, I'm gonna give it a shot and go for it anyways. So I remember when I was job hunting before I landed this job, I definitely was like, you know what, even if I meet like half of the requirements, I'm gonna apply and I'm gonna let them tell me no, because I'm confident in myself now, realizing that not everybody's going to match the entire criteria of a job posting. They're going to have to train me. It's okay for me not to 100% of everything. So I feel like that in itself is very limiting for women, and especially like you said in the chart that we're going to share later, in those like 10, 20 years of women, like think about all those opportunities that they missed out on that could have shaped their careers, that could have shaped and changed their lives, that they didn't take that risk because of that imposter syndrome, that confidence that they lacked.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I would totally agree with all that. I'm going to jump in here for a bit. So my thought behind that question was just thinking about, my personal experiences and where I felt like, my a man's mediocre work will, be held at a higher, will go farther than my best work. So I was kind of thinking of it along those lines. And then also just, like the patriarchy, I was just like thinking about how that could contribute to it too, right? Because we're conditioned from childhood a certain way, women, girls, women, you have to be a certain way, and, you know, step back, be quiet. These kinds of things, these all can contribute to, you know, experiencing feelings of self-doubt or confidence, because you shouldn't be too loud, you shouldn't be too, you know, you get labeled even as a child, you're being feisty, you're being bossy. So I was kind of thinking of it, you know, along those lines, and just, it would be interesting, right? If there was, I don't know, I didn't find anything specific around it, but it'd be interesting to see, you know, how more information about how those things affect, you know, women dealing with imposter syndrome.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that imposter syndrome is universal, and both men and women experience that self-doubt. I just think the way that men and women approach it is different. And so I agree with that whole, you know, there's gender bias and possible norms that that men may feel more anxiety or pressure with imposter syndrome, and then they may want to hide it, so they tend to get stressed out and not potentially do anything about it. Whereas I feel like women may look at it and approach it in a different manner, and then possibly get to the root cause and start working on what they need to do, whether it's, you know, talk to someone or work on themselves or whatever it might be to resolve how they're feeling around that issue. So I don't know, I read some articles as well, and kind of not necessarily anything that was set in stone, but there was a lot of assumptions around what you were saying, Samaya, as far as we're conditioned a certain way when we're younger, how to be as a woman or a man, and that's how we tend to, I guess, act when it comes to things like this.
Well, there was a podcast we'll share with you guys too, that I had shared with the girls earlier this week about imposter syndrome. I forgot what the name of it is, but we'll share with you guys. And the panelists are all Asian women, and they were saying how they were bringing up the discussion of, like, is your inner voice like the voice of your parents, which is a conversation before that is had of this, you know, if you're being raised in an environment where success is expected, perfection is expected, and that's the environment you're being raised in, you're going to carry that with you. So when you go into the workspace, it's the same thing. Perfection is expected, regardless if that's the expectation or not in that particular job. That is the expectation you're holding yourself. And in context, one of the notes that I wrote down is, like, what are the inner, you know, what are the critiques we make to little boys versus little girls, and how does that then stay with them as they move forward? You know, I know sometimes, and I know we're going to cover this later, like culturally, we tend to be more strict in Afghan cultures with our girls than with our boys. So if our boys experience more, you know, this, if they have a sense of, like, there's more freedom, they can go do something, and there hasn't been much of, like, a risk. Like, even if something doesn't go right, what's going to happen? Versus for the women in the community, definitely the opposite situation, where there was a lot of risk in almost everything that we did. So we had to be extra cautious, and there were spaces that we did not belong in, and to then go into a professional workspace that is not the same culture as what you're being raised in, where you're expected to go into a space that you are then expected to speak up and to voice your opinion and to participate. And it's tricky to navigate when your whole life it's like, you can be in this space but not in this one, but if you are in this one, don't talk too loud, don't laugh too loud, don't say anything inappropriate, don't do X and Y. So you have all these restrictions that you're thinking about that I'm pretty sure it carries on with you in other situations in life.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think this is a good segue into that whole Afghan-American identity question. You know, how does our Afghan-American identity and I asked, either contribute or challenge the feelings that occur with imposter syndrome? I know for me, definitely it contributes. You know, being exceptional was a theme, right? Growing up. And I think a lot of Afghan Americans can relate to this. It's prevalent in our culture. You have to get certain type of grades. You're expected to go to a certain type of school, even, you know, a particular career. the top careers of doctor, lawyer, engineer. So, and even for women, so we're held to these really high standards, and I definitely carried those into the workplace. And especially for me, I think one of the things that really contributed to my feelings of imposter syndrome was not having a college degree and being in a position where majority of the people around me had a college degree. So, and then also hearing it, from family members, or, in my personal life, like, oh, you didn't finish school, or going to certain events. And, people ask, the first question I would get asked was, oh, what school did you go to? And, for a long time, I would find ways to get around it. But now I remember somebody actually recently, we were at a wedding, somebody asked me, so where did you go to school? And I was just honest. I was like, you know what? I actually didn't finish school. I don't have a degree. I'm actually back in school now, but I'm back in school for something that's has nothing to do with the job that I'm doing. It's something that's more personal for me. But I'm not going to be ashamed of it. I mean, I have a whole lot of experience under my belt. So, I'm good with it. I finally have come to terms with it, and I've realized that I do have those soft skills, and in the industry that I'm in, I've learned a lot about it. So I'm confident in why or how I got here. And so now I'm not so afraid to kind of speak up, regardless of who it is, even if it's like an auntie, or or whoever it is, to say, well, this is what it is, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah, the point I wonder, like how has it all maybe helped in that situation? I think we also come from a very opinionated culture,
Yeah.
where we do have an opinion about everything. So I think once I got comfortable in that space and understand and got that confidence, I think it then helped me navigate it. And that I did have things to say. I come from a household that's pretty direct, and I feel like that's just how Afghans communicate sometimes. And being able to be direct in those conversations, and I had my share of opinions to give. It was just I just didn't voice them, or I didn't know if they fit in or not. So while maybe in the beginning there were so many questions in my head, and I was so cautious about certain environments because I didn't know how they were going to be taken, once I did get confident, I do feel like that it's like my Afghan in me that wants to say it all.
Yeah. Get the last word in.
I think it's contributed for me because a lot of the things that you all said, but also because I'm the firstborn, and I felt like I had to be the role model for my sisters, and my sister and my brother. And quite honestly, I felt like that's what my parents wanted to see from me also. So they expected more from me. Get straight A's, make sure you wear the right clothes when we go out, make sure you're talking to the right people, make sure you're doing this, you're doing that. And so I felt like I always had to be perfect or do the right thing, or and if I didn't, I felt like I wasn't maybe good enough. And today I see all these people do, all kinds of different things, and parents who aren't expecting so much. And that was so different than how I grew up. But I think that has to do a lot with how I've grown up and why I am the way I am. And it's contributed to my perfectionism, for one. But also why I think I need to do more than just, average to be the best.
Absolutely.
I think I definitely, really in terms of like the expectations for being the girl in the house. I mean, I'm the only girl, I only have brothers, and I feel like that expectation that my parents have set for what the appropriate way that a daughter acts, an Afghan girl acts, the standards that they've set, I felt like I've always been an imposter because I don't satisfy their goals, how I should be and how I should be acting. And it definitely translates into like my confidence outwards as well. I feel like not being able to satisfy what the expectations for a person in my role can definitely translate into expectations my parents have of me as well. So I feel like that constant like boxes that I feel like I need to check off that I've had instilled in me from a young age translates into, I feel like, the accountabilities I set for myself in a professional environment as well.
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that you said about, being Afghan and having that kind of being opinionated. And it's just like, it just dawned on me, also just being, children of immigrants or, refugees, our parents generally have been pretty resourceful, jack of all trades. They've come to this country, they've had to relearn. I mean, some of our family members were doctors and, had these like amazing jobs back home. And then they came back and to the U.S. and took whatever job they could. And they're resourceful and they've been able to, kind of learn these new skills. And so I think I definitely brought that into the workplace where kind of being like nosy too, trying to figure out how to do everything, trying to learn everything. So having that learning agility definitely probably helped me deal with some of those feelings of self-doubt and help me get past it or get through it, not necessarily pass it, but get through those moments of self-doubt.
Yeah, no, there was didn't really connect too much like being Afghan, but I was thinking earlier of like these things that go through our head and the situations that we're in and trying to assess. Of course, I think it goes back to one of your earlier questions about how do we get past it and like how do we navigate it. And where was it? I have all these sticky notes around my laptop. I was trying to jot down all these ideas. And something that I have started to do, and I would love to get your guys' thoughts if you guys have done something similar, is I catch myself maybe feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome when a new opportunity comes up. And I think that's where like I'll question everything about myself, about whether or not like, am I setting myself up for failure because I'm taking this on? Like, can I do it? And the way I respond to it now, oh, it's right here. So instead of me thinking in my head, like, I don't think I can do it, I'm not qualified for it, what I will respond when someone's like, hey, well, I have an opportunity for you to take on, I will respond with, I would love to take it on, this is really exciting, and we'll probably need a little bit of guidance and support from you if that's okay. And that, for me, has changed so much. The ability to be on and be really positive about it, but also acknowledging, like, hey, I know I've never done this, but instead of cutting myself off, having thoughts, just right away being like, if you could help me and guide and support me, that'd be fantastic too. And lately, the projects I've taken on the past 6 months, this has been the case, and this is how I've responded, and it's been so helpful, where I haven't had to be like the soloist, where I'm like, I can do everything myself, I don't need any help, I got this. Acknowledging that that's not the best way for this project, or any project. But also knowing that I have my strengths, I know what I'm good at, but the things that I'm not, I would like more help, I've identified them, and I'm going to work together with either my manager or other people on this project. So that way, whatever my blind spots are, they've been identified, we're working on it, and I'm able to set myself and this project up for success.
Yeah, no, I really like that, because obviously, like, the people that are coming to you and offering you these projects or these assignments or looking to you, they see something in you, right? There's that, then that's why they're coming to you and asking you to help out or giving the opportunity to you, because they see something. And sometimes that's what it is, right? Others can see in us what we can't see ourselves.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was thinking about it earlier. I was like, let me write it down and bring it up today. Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys have anything similar or like tactics that you guys use for these situations.
Yeah, I definitely feel it. I mean, I just started this role that I'm in right now about a month and a half ago, and I feel like as I'm like starting to learn and get adjusted here, they're giving me projects and things I need to work on. But I obviously want to make sure that I give off a very good impression, because they don't know my work ethic yet. So I'm saying yes to most things. Asking like, who can I reach out to if I have questions? It's my point of contact. If you guys have a similar setup that I can reference any other resources, if it's not a person, is there a website that I can go to? Is there a database? Like, what are my resources that I can set myself up for success? So if you don't have a person that can guide me through this, maybe I can figure it out myself, but point me in the right direction at the very least. But yeah, I know what you mean, because you want to make sure that you show that you are capable of what they're asking for help. And although, like, working in a startup, I'm sure there's a lot of processes that you have to create because it's new and no one's done it before. So I feel like being able to ask for help is definitely a really big thing. Feeling comfortable with, and it's something that a lot of us feel shy to do because you don't want to show that you don't know. And that's the thing, is that especially when you start a new job or you take on a new project, it can be something you've never done before, and there's nothing wrong with saying that you haven't had an experience with it, but like asking for guidance and then taking the rest on yourself if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I 100% agree with what both of you have said, and that's actually best practice. Yes, someone that I have started also. If they changed what I'm doing now, my role's changed from what I was doing in the past, and so with my new job, it's very important that I ask questions actually and reach out and talk to those people who are the project managers, since I'm more in a consultant role, and ask them about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and how I can help so that I'm able to help them. So being able to go to them, set up the meetings with the right audience and ask questions and understand exactly what they're doing has helped me become more of an expert in that area, so I can give that guidance that's needed. So it's funny that you bring that up, because that's definitely something that I've changed in my work experience now.
Yeah, and I think that for me, what I like to do is kind of list my achievements, things that that I did well on, and I got feedback. I got affirmation that I did this really well. Or so I like to kind of keep track of those things and remind myself that I've been doing pretty well thus far. I mean, so there's something there, and again, it all goes back to being comfortable enough to ask questions, right? Instead of getting yourself into a mess of saying, okay, I'm going to figure this out on my own, and then either not being able to present something of quality, or being late, or asking questions when it's too late. So I think it's a lot more responsible, and I think people see a lot more merit in that too, that you're asking those questions up front, and it creates a collaborative environment too.
Another one that I heard of that I thought was really good, and this depends on like the company you work for and what the culture is, but people being open and honest about the fact that they also feel this way. Knowing that, like, let's say you're in a room and you're in a meeting and there's 10 people, and you find out that 8 out of 10 feel like imposters, you no longer feel like an imposter anymore.
Right.
So they were talking about how it's so important to work to have a culture where people can be open and honest about how they're feeling. And another point connected to that was being open and honest, like with your manager or someone at work, that can reaffirm your skills. And which I think is so important. We all go through times where we do doubt ourselves for whatever reason, and to have someone to voice those concerns to someone, and for them to be like, "You're fine.
Yeah.
You do all these things really, really well. You're doing great." And you're like, "Okay, I'm doing great. I'm gonna go back and kill all these things that I'm working on."
Yeah.
So having that one person, even multiple people that you can go to, and they can help reaffirm.
It's funny you say that. Sorry to interrupt you, but it's funny you say that because because you sometimes, and I'm trying to overcome this, I get those affirmations just where they say, "You're doing amazing. I can't believe you did this," or "How fast you did this," or "Can't believe you did so great at this." And then I'm still thinking to myself, like, I didn't do anything that hard. Like, I don't understand what you're. I mean, I don't get it.
I think that's.
Are you just saying that because you want me to do better, and you're trying to, be my, that confident builder like I do for my kids, coach my son. I'm, "Oh, you get him, even if he's not doing great." I'm like, you're doing great, just to make sure that he's better. Or do you really mean it? It's weird, because sometimes some things are just too easy, and when they say I do a great job, I just don't know if they're being serious or not. but I have to tell myself, no, they are. You know, I'm an adult, I'm not a child. They don't tell you. Yeah.
But I think that that's part of that perfectionist identity, though, too, because even though you're performing so well, you always think, I could have done things better. I could have done it better. You know, it's okay. And, you know, other people are looking at you and saying, you did a great job. And you're like, well, I could have done it better. So you're hard on yourself.
What it is, because I'm just like, they're just saying that
Right.
to me because they're okay.
I definitely deal with that all the time. I mean, I work in an environment with literally, like, I'm on an site. I'm in St. Louis this week. Tomorrow I'm preparing myself to walk into a conference room full of older white men, and I'm going to be probably the only woman there. So it's always intimidating because these gentlemen have been in the industry for years. Everyone knows each other, and so it's always like, here I walk in, you know, and I have something to say, and I make them listen to me when they don't. So it's always an interesting dynamic. But I also, in my head, I just like making it fun for myself too. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna walk in here and I'm gonna put on my customer service voice, and I'm gonna be, you know, I hype myself up. I'm like, you could do this, and it helps. It helps me get through the process, and I, you know, I always get good feedback. So I mean, thus far I've gotten, you know, pretty decent feedback. So I'm gonna, and then I also
Power pose. Power pose is weird.
you know, right? No, you know what works though is, you know, everybody's sitting. I have a really bad back, so I like to get up and stand up and walk around. And I don't know, people get so weirded out by it, but it's like, I'm not gonna sit there, and I don't know, I don't know, makes them. It is, right? Yeah. Yeah. Whatever works. Whatever works.
Good posture is another form of like coming off confident. And someone was telling me the other day that she had been given feedback. She was like a manager. She had been given feedback that like you need to speak up more in meetings. And she goes, you know, if I don't have something to say, like, I'm not just going to say fluff. And he goes, it's not about saying fluff. You're a manager. If someone says something that's great, like, affirm them.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an opportunity for you to be heard. And I was like something went off in my head where I was like, that's so true. Like, if you're in situations where you're like, I don't have anything new to add, but I can affirm someone else's comment. Or suggestion, that is an opportunity to speak up and say something that can help crack whatever is that you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I want to kind of get in, we have just a few minutes left. We'll kind of get into, you know, some tips. Like I said, there's a lot of resources. There's a really great website. It's literally impostersyndrome.com. There's this, her name is Dr. Valerie Young. She's a expert in imposter syndrome, worked with, you know, every company you can think of, and has done TED Talks. So there's a lot of really, really good information on there. And one of the articles that I really appreciated was last year, Michelle Obama, she was speaking at an event, I think it was in the UK, with some young women, maybe even teenagers, but she talked about experiencing, you know, having imposter syndrome. She related her imposter syndrome to more so, you know, being from a marginalized group, but how she felt it even when she was the first lady. And so there's a lot of really good information. So I would definitely suggest everyone go out and check out, you know, that site. But some of the things that I pulled from the site, from one of the articles, is kind of how to get through and acknowledge your imposter syndrome. So, you know, like we talked about earlier, how childhood messages and experiences can contribute to it. So the suggestion is to examine those childhood messages, but don't get stuck there, right? Don't let yourself dwell in those messages. You want to acknowledge them and address them, but try to get past them. And then understanding that there is going to be a little bit of luck, timing, connections. For example, the position that I'm in right now, I was referred. I basically had the job before I even interviewed, because they were building out, it was a new team and they were building it out, and, you know, I had a really strong reference. But what did I do with that, right? So so what are you going to do with that? It happened, don't dwell on how it happened. Again, what are you going to do with it? And then keep going, regardless of how confident you feel. So even if you feel insecure, just keep working at it, right? Keep asking those questions, because eventually those things will help build that confidence. And then you hit on this, Yasaman. Talk about your imposter feelings, but again, don't dwell on them. Share it with people. And I know that there are a lot of companies that are having open conversations about it. And it's interesting. The company that my husband works for, it's like total opposite of where I work. It's just, everyone's all about their feelings and very, very open. So those things do exist. And if nobody's talking about it, then maybe you could be the first one to kind of address it. And then the only way to stop feeling like an imposter is to stop thinking like one. So just retraining how you think. And I know, Yasmin, you guys all kind of give examples of that, of how to, how you can learn to rethink or unlearn certain habits or behaviors. And then the last one was, recognize that it's not all about you, that you're there to not just grow yourself, but support a team possibly, or if you're in a management role, you're there to help people grow in their roles. So taking that that out of it helps as well. So I'm just gonna throw it back out to you guys for some last words or last comments.
Trying to think what else how to end this. I definitely think it's a mindset, and why we feel how we do in certain situations is very valid. I also think it's very possible to deal with it. And one of the articles I read said that when you have those thoughts, acknowledge it as an observation and not truth. Mm-hmm. So it's okay to know that it's there. It just happened. Okay, cool. Now I need to actually deal with the situation and not let myself sit here and dwell on the fact that I just had this thought. So that for me was really helpful, in that these can all be changed. You can work on it. It's not set forever. So that's how I would end this.
I think that it's important that people realize that we all go through it. It's a really common feeling. And like, I forget which one of you guys had mentioned, but it's definitely nice to have a cheerleader to remind you of how capable you are. It could be a friend, it could be a colleague, it could be someone that you worked on a project with, that just reaffirm the capabilities that you do have. It's nice to, it's good reminder. And so we all need it every once in a while. And I don't think it's embarrassing to ask for it. So maybe asking a colleague or something like that, saying like, what is it? What are my strengths that I've on a project or something that I've worked on with you? I just want to reaffirm in myself that I am capable of doing X, Y, and Z. So don't be afraid to ask for support and reaffirm it, but we all go through it.
Yep, and kind of ditto to what everyone said, and just like I said before, I think we all are where we are for a reason, and I think that we are great at what we do, and I think we just need to remind ourselves that all the time.
Absolutely. And the last thought that I had was, obviously imposter syndrome is not a disorder, but it could lead to anxiety and even depression if you're constantly doubting yourself and feeling inadequate. So in those cases where you feel like it's actually hurting you and you actually getting the job done, then at that point, then, you might want to consider talking to someone, a professional, to get the help that you need. But again, I agree with what everyone shared, and want to thank everyone for joining us. This was a really, really important topic for me, and I know for all of us. So I hope you guys have gotten something out of it. We'll share the resources we talked about on the discussion board, and I hope everyone has a good night. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.